What you've very kindly agreed to talk about is your work around virtual humans. To start us off, then, what is a virtual human?
I would say, most broadly, I'd define it as being a software program that tries to represent itself to some extent as a human. Okay. So, you know, a spreadsheet isn't trying to represent itself as a human, so that doesn't count. But a chatbot is trying to typically represent itself as being a human. Now, obviously, the degree to which it does that can vary quite immensely. And chat, natural language, is just the most obvious element in which it might portray itself as human. It could just be actually just the look of it. So obviously the visualization of the avatar. It could also be in terms of things like empathy and showing emotion. So there's a lot of different ways in which it could portray itself as being human. And to us, a virtual human is an application that is doing that. But I think also probably a little bit more, it's about an application which has the concept of something like self. So it's something that is or a level of autonomy. Because if all you're doing is creating a nice looking 3D avatar to be filmed in a Pixar movie, to us that's more of what tends to be called sometimes a digital human rather than a virtual human, because that's just a human represented in bits. Whereas to us, a virtual human, there's something about autonomy to it as well.
So it's obviously a massive field, really, because as you just demonstrated, there's a whole bunch of areas you could even if you just picked off one or two bits at a time. There's going to be a whole lot of stuff to investigate. How did you first get interested in it? I mean, why bite off any of it at all?
I suppose just from a general interest as interest in technology and in science fiction, and I think that I first came across them probably in the very early days of the web. So in about would have been mid 1990s, is it? If I remember when the web was now. The mid sort of 90, mid 1990s. And whilst I'd always dabbled in programming, I think I always found the challenge was once you've written a program, how do you get it out there? Yeah. And you know, it was back in the old days of distributing 3.5-inch floppy disks around the place. But also, the nice thing about the internet was obviously you could write a bit of something and instantly make it available to people. And that sort of led me quite quickly to the nascent sort of chatbot community that was out there using AI/ML, artificial intelligence markup language, and bots like Alice, and suddenly discovering actually, you know, I could write this AI/ML stuff myself. And so that got me started. But then I think the thing that then moved it on quite a pace was then, as I mentioned earlier on, we did a lot of our early life inside of the Second Life virtual world. Yeah. And the nice thing about the Second Life virtual world is I could quite easily create an avatar inside that world that was then driven by the chatbot software. And of course, because Second Life, everybody is an avatar, as you walked around Second Life, if you came across this chatbot, you couldn't tell by looking at it that it was being driven by a computer rather than by a human. And you actually had to start talking to it. Right. And actually, you started from the assumption this was actually a human rather than the assumption that this was a chatbot. And so actually, that whole sort of psychology of that interaction